After Indiana, we are going to move on to the Detroit Pistons, and we'll put 7 minutes on the clock. What is your biggest question for the Motor City Pistons?
My biggest question is Jerami Grant question mark. It's just, what are they going to do with him? He's under contract for $21 million next year. It is an expiring deal. He is tremendously appealing across the league because of what he can do as a shot creating, defensively versatile forward who can take and make 3-pointers, who can attack the basket. He can fill all of those different roles. And his timeline just doesn't match up with this young and aggressive Pistons team, especially given what we saw Detroit do in his absence down the stretch when they played a lot differently. They handed a lot more minutes to the young guys. They really made it Cade Cunningham's team, and all of a sudden they were super competitive. So I think that's the impetus they need to actually pull the trigger on a deal here. And it's just a matter of what that's going to look like. Are they going the established star route, just at a different position? Are they trying to get even more draft equity to bring in another big name young player to pair with Cunningham on this super young timeline? It could go any number of directions because any number of teams could and should have legitimate interest in Grant.
And also, I've moved away from the timeline doesn't match the team's timeline. I'm not as for that. It is legitimate, especially in this case, because he is in the last year of his deal.
Yep.
And
I don't care about the age thing. It's just that you're going to have to pay him.
4 years, 112 is his max extension, which a lot of people think he'll get. And look, I'm all for players getting paid. From a team's perspective, that's not a no-brainer decision when talking about a non-star. It's just he's 28. It's not a no-brainer decision. That is certainly the biggest question for them. I did give, would you have done this is like repeating a question, but if you're getting the 13th pick, Kai Jones and Terry Rozier, is that enough value to get Jerami Grant? I think it was for me.
I think so.
I like Terry Rozier, which the question of my question for the Pistons, sorry, I don't know why I can't talk, is how are they planning to flesh out the roster around Cade Cunningham? And this was Spins and I had actually talked about this. Are you going the frenetic athleticism route where because Cade Cunningham is this bigger player who's effectively a point guard, and even Killian Hayes is big for a 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is. So are you trying to go with just a bunch of bigger defenders who can guard all these different positions? You have Sadiq Bey there already. Does that mean that maybe you want a more athletic presence at the 5 than an Isaiah Stewart / Marvin Bagley? Certainly has hops, but not the defensive chops.
That's future All-Star Marvin Bagley, by the way.
Who is he going to be back in Detroit? He's a free agent.
I hope so.
So, or are you going that route, or are you going to be prioritizing optimization offensively, which I think would be at this point. It depends on, I don't know what's going to happen in the draft, but given what Killian Hayes showed towards the last month or month and a half of the season where he was putting pressure on the rim, had the floater going, I think you just shooting. It'd be nice if it was functional shooting, maybe guys who could dribble and defend. Which one of those are you which sort of those roster
shooting? Because Cade Cunningham is one of those rare players who can completely control an offense. I'm not talking about a guy who can get his own shots when he wants, but completely control the flow and tempo of a game and look so comfortable doing it. He understands how to manipulate schemes. He understands how to slow the ball down, how to stay calm under pressure, how to draw double teams and find open guys. And he, much like similar players like Luka Doncic, you want to surround them with as much shooting as you can to make it a nightmare for defenses, because he is so good at probing into these spots, figuring out what a defense is doing and hitting the open guy, that if you can truly play a 5-out look with him running the show, you're not going to get stopped.
I guess I would just be, if we're operating under the assumption they are going to move Jerami Grant, which I agree with you, I think he'll be traded. That's going to compromise your defense. And if you lean into shooting, that could come at the expense of your defense. You look at their offense this past season and it feels like there were more offensive flags than red flags. But again, if you start to change up the talent, we saw it with the Knicks, who got lucky. They got lucky with their opponent 3-point shooting last year, but they leaned so far towards the offensive route. They went arguably a couple moves too far. Now they had Kemba just didn't pan out. Fournier was up and down. Derrick Rose was injured. And if you're making smarter investments, sure. But I do think, and Spins had argued in favor of this, and it made me rethink to where I don't have an answer for them. I understand the thought process of Cade Cunningham is already so good on offense, and we saw what he did manipulating defenses when he didn't have infinite space around him or dependable shooting and finishing for the entire season around him. Like, why wouldn't you just be like, okay, the offensive end is set because we have this guy. Like, let's guard. And look, in an ideal world, you're just surrounding him with a bunch of 3-and-D people. And you definitely want some functional, like, ball handling, obviously. If you had to choose between the two, I actually think it's more of a discussion than I was with you going into that, by the way. And I think I still lean towards space that fucking floor around him. And let's see where we get to.
Yeah, I think that if you say, like, okay, we have him, fuck it, let's move on, then the issue is the pressure that you're putting on him. Because we've seen, like, look at what's happening in the playoffs right now with Jokic and an injured Nuggets team, where, like, even if you're surrounding him with great defensive players, when you task one guy with doing everything on offense, you're tasking him with doing everything on offense for 82 games, and then the playoffs, when everything gets bogged down, there's more bodies being thrown at you. There are more schematic variations being thrown at you, and you can't make it through that. So that's why, like, I think you capitalized on the strength rather than just assume that strength is going to float you no matter what.
I think I agree with you too. And I know you use Luka Doncic as an example, but until the season, like, that was the perfect example in the playoffs. And now that he has Dinwiddie and Brunson, those two are better defenders than some, but neither of them are great defenders. And, well, they're no Donovan Mitchell. But sorry, that was so unnecessary. I'm tired. If you can get,
I'm confused because you just mentioned Donovan Mitchell and defense in the same sentence.
If you can use, let's use the Pelicans this season as an example where, yes, they have a Herb Jones, which Detroit doesn't have, so maybe they're better. Like, look at, and you need the one, like, really good wing defender for sure. Do you think that Sadiq Bey is going to be Cade Cunningham?
I think himself? It could be.
Which is fine, but I think there's reason to believe that properly coached teams are able to build schemes where it's okay, maybe we're not forcing a ton of turnovers, but we don't foul a lot. We get back in transition. And if we're putting enough bodies, Detroit doesn't currently have the capacity to do this, but, like, they were 13th in offensive rebounding, I think. So if you're going to put enough bodies around the glass, pressure the other people who are grabbing the ball to stop them from getting in transition, I think it might be easier. And this is only something I've recently given thought to. Is it easier to outperform your talent on offense or defense? And I think it's defense.
I think it's defense. Yeah.
Even though defense is probably the thing about the NBA I understand the least.
It feels like you can scheme your way into competent defenses, but you can't really do the same on offense without shot makers because you ultimately have to make baskets.
Look, we went over on the Detroit Pistons longer than anybody. That's how committed we are. So don't tell us we don't talk about every single team enough on this podcast.